They're turning newborns into ticking time bombs. That chilling outburst has rumbled through parent forums ever since a groundbreaking plan was announced in England. One that could see every baby's entire genetic code meticulously mapped, all before they even blink at the world. Today, we're peeling back the layers of that startling revelation. Will this genetic test become the miracle blueprint for lifelong health? Or are we about to enter an age of children burdened with diagnoses that may never materialize? Welcome to our deep dive into the heart of an unfolding medical revolution and potential controversy. The idea is simple yet world-shaking. By the year 2030, each new life in England could be greeted not just with the warmth of a family, but also with a comprehensive genetic profile. In this episode, we will scrutinize how this seismic shift intersects with ethical dilemmas, potential mental health repercussions, and the enormous question, are we birthing a generation of children haunted by diseases they might never develop? We've all heard the romantic notion of unlocking DNA secrets, right? Genetic testing has long been revered as the crystal ball of modern medicine. Experts tout its remarkable power to identify obscure diseases, shape better treatments, and offer parents the comfort of early diagnoses. Yet hidden behind that promise lies a dark undercurrent. When you spool out the entire blueprint of an infant's genetic code, you also sow the seeds of potential fear, confusion, and overdiagnosis. In this video, we plunge into the crux of the issue, the unstoppable momentum of medical progress, the heartbreaks lurking behind false positives, and the clash between parents' quest for reassurance and the risk of drowning in data. First, let's remind ourselves, newborn screening programs aren't new. Classic heel prick tests look for a handful of rare conditions, aiming to intervene early and avert severe health hurdles. But the new plan in England takes that limited approach and catapults it into uncharted territory. Instead of testing blood for 9 rare diseases, the proposal suggests mapping the entire genetic code of every baby, thereby offering glimpses of hundreds of conditions. Imagine for a moment the flood of information that might land in a family's lap. At the precise time they're already overwhelmed by sleepless nights and the emotional whirlwind of welcoming new life. So, what exactly sparks alarm here? Let's start with a question. If you knew your child was statistically predisposed to something devastating, say, a degenerative disease in old age, how might it change the way you raise them? That one question is the heart of the controversy. On paper, genetic tests claim merely to show probabilities, not guaranteed outcomes. But in reality, it's alarmingly easy to conflate risk with certainty. Parents might read a high likelihood as a guaranteed fate. Clinicians, too, can misinterpret these complex odds. The moment a genetic test flags your child for a condition, it's tempting to see them always through that anxious lens. And that's one major problem. By labeling a healthy baby as a possible future patient, we risk overshadowing their actual childhood. A day at the playground becomes a fraught exercise in avoidance, in just in case. Family gatherings might swirl with whispered discussions about when that illness will set in, rather than if it will ever happen at all. As you can imagine, the psychological burden can creep into every aspect of daily life, cracking the joy and spontaneity that shape a child's early years. Will your toddler feel free to try sports if their parents constantly fear a genetic disorder? Or might they sense a gloom-laden tension whenever they mention feeling tired? But that's not the full story. There's another scalding issue lurking beneath the bright slogans, false positives. This phenomenon was grasped more keenly by the public during the height of worldwide disease testing. If you apply a test to an entire population, false positives can outnumber the real cases, even with a test that's quite accurate. Add genetic code mapping to that equation, and the scale of confusion escalates dramatically. Parents will anxiously ask, is my child truly at risk? Or is this one big laboratory mistake? And they won't be alone. Health services could be choked by an influx of families piling in for retests, second opinions, and anxious phone calls at all hours. When each new piece of data is delivered in the form of risk percentages, the stage is set for miscommunication. If you tell an exhausted parent, your baby has a 30% increased chance of developing condition X compared to the general population, many might interpret that as, my child is guaranteed to be ill. Let's be honest. We're not all statisticians, and medical jargon doesn't exactly dissolve anxiety. Even well-meaning clinicians might falter in explaining the true meaning behind these numbers, especially if they're under pressure, with a queue of other appointments waiting. We also have to confront a troubling question. At what point does caution morph into paranoia, and how might this new approach tilt the entire healthcare system? If thousands of people are flagged annually, demand for follow-up testing and extra appointments will spike. Specialists, genetic counselors, and even mental health professionals must handle that burden. Could the National Health Service, NHS, in England, already stretched to its limits, bear the weight of new responsibilities without compromising everywhere else? In this script, we're going to dissect whether this genetic goldmine might buckle under its own success. Now, if you're already intrigued by the swirling debate, whether you're a parent, a future parent, or just fascinated by medical frontiers, consider sharing your support as we explore these twists further. A quick gesture of approval is enough. If you find this topic as intriguing as we do, tap that like button so we know you're right here with us, venturing through this labyrinth of genetic discovery. Your engagement is a brilliant signal that we should dig even deeper into these compelling topics. Let's pull back slightly and look at the bigger historical context. Over centuries, breakthroughs in healthcare have waltzed between triumph and trepidation. Blood transfusions were once seen as taboo. Vaccines faced enormous skepticism. With genetics, we've inched toward a dream of ultimate knowledge, of reading life's blueprint one letter at a time. But perhaps no prior medical leap has been this personal. After all, your genetic code is your identity. It's the script your body tries to follow from birth to the last breath. That's exactly why the notion of entire baby genomes being recorded has ignited such a heated dialogue. Unlike a standard blood test, a full genomic sequence covers everything, right down to the remote possibility of diseases decades away. Consider how official messaging has described it. We can leapfrog disease, some say, or diagnose health conditions before symptoms begin. For many of us, those are mesmerizing possibilities. Yet, illusions arise if we take leapfrogging disease literally to mean we're guaranteeing protection. Real life is more nuanced. Genetics can show that a child's predisposition to a disease is higher or lower, but it lacks a crystal ball's precision. A child with a high-risk profile might stay healthy forever. Another with low risk might unexpectedly develop the illness. When the language from officials or the media oversells certainty, it can breed confusion and heartbreak for parents who feel they've been promised near-infallible predictions. One of the things quietly worrying genetic experts is the potential for overtreatment, intervening in conditions that never manifest. Picture a healthy child who tests positive in a broad screening, meaning they have genes that might predispose them to neurological decline in late adulthood. Let's say the doctors recommend frequent follow-ups to stay on top of it, just to be safe. As the years roll by, the child grows up under a perpetual shadow, always monitored, coaxed into special diets, or warned away from certain physical risks. All this in an effort to sidestep something that might turn out to be a phantom threat. By the time they're in their 20s, they have essentially lived on a medical treadmill, bracing for a future that never arrives. The serious psychological distress generated by that environment is not trivial, especially if the general message stamped on your life from infancy is you might get sick. Even everyday decisions, like choosing a hobby or deciding on a career, could be warped by that lingering specter of uncertainty. The parallel fear is that we might create a society where children define themselves by their genetic code. The question arises, would you want your child to wear a label from day one, unusually high risk of condition Z, watch them carefully, and would that overshadow their talents, dreams, and sense of identity? And let's not forget the avalanche of potential false positives. For a while now, medical professionals have tried to highlight the difference between population screening and selective testing. Population screening, which picks out entire groups of people to test, can indeed save lives when the tests are highly accurate, the diseases are sufficiently common, and the treatments are clearly beneficial. But for rare conditions scattered through a massive population, even advanced tests might generate more confusion than clarity. We saw how false positives in earlier disease screening efforts led people to isolate, get retested repeatedly, or live in undue panic. Imagine doubling or tripling that effect in the context of newborns. Great amounts of time, money, and emotional energy would be funneled into investigating suspicious results, some of which might be outright erroneous. Each additional test or appointment carries risks of its own. Meanwhile, we have to ask, how is the healthcare system supporting these concerned families? Are there enough genetic counselors? Do we have the necessary mental health professionals who specialize in guiding individuals through complex risk data? In fact, this is a key point. Truly understanding genetic risk demands careful interpretation. Many doctors, even those steeped in routine medical practice, haven't specialized in genomics. Some might inadvertently overstate the findings, while others could understate them. You can imagine the chaos if official guidance on interpreting the data is lacking, or if it fails to keep pace with the exponential growth in test results. Although the concept of universal screening draws headlines, the foundation for it must rest on thorough education. We need an army of coaches, genetic counselors, ready to provide that nuanced guidance. Right now, in England, that workforce is hardly robust enough for universal screening. You might be thinking, well, knowledge is always power, right? Isn't it better to know than not know? Indeed, knowledge can be powerful. Early detection of a treatable or preventable disease is a wonderful advantage. No one denies that. But the crucial difference between knowledge and insight is context. Suppose there is a condition that's incredibly rare, lacks a definitive treatment, and only surfaces in late life. If a newborn's test says slightly elevated risk, is that actionable knowledge or a source of anxiety that will shape their entire childhood? Let's explore the unknown territory of how children themselves might react once they're old enough to comprehend this genetic label pinned to them. Could they become defiant, refusing extra medical appointments? Or might they develop an almost obsessive focus on health, living in constant fear? The psychological reverberations could be intense, casting a long shadow over entire families. Our quest for an early glimpse into disease might inadvertently warp how children see themselves. I'm that baby with the loaded genetic gun. Take the example of adult testing for conditions like early-stage cognitive decline. In specialized memory clinics, these tests perform fairly well, specifically because the patients already show some symptoms. But if you set the same test loose on the general population, where the majority are healthy, the number of false positives can skyrocket. A staggering portion of these flagged individuals remain cognitively fine, but now brandish an incorrect label. The parallel in newborn genetic screening is not hard to see. The scale, of course, is even bigger. Let's pivot and talk about potential benefits, because it would be a mistake to assume this is all doom and gloom. In certain scenarios, like a well-established genetic variant known to cause severe issues early, detecting it at birth can save a life. Parents get the heads up to start medical interventions that could dramatically reshape their child's future. And that good outcome is precisely why a universal screening plan has garnered excitement from medical visionaries. They picture a future where kids never fall through the cracks, where no rare genetic condition remains hidden until it's too late to treat. The tension lies in whether that broad net catches far more than we intend. So, how do we move forward? Most voices in the medical community agree we don't have to abandon the dream of advanced genetic testing, but we do need a stable infrastructure that's built with care. That means, at a minimum, robust guidelines on how to interpret results, mandatory training for primary care doctors, and a vast expansion of genetic counseling services. If there's one lesson from previous screening controversies, it's that communication is everything. A test result is never simply positive or negative. It's a swirl of probabilities, context, and potential biases in the testing method. Let's press on with another pressing question. Who controls the genetic data? Storing the entire genome of a newborn is a major undertaking, both logistically and ethically. The data must be safeguarded. Mistakes or hacking incidents could result in some of the most personal, unchangeable information about an individual being exposed. And beyond hacking, imagine workplace discrimination down the road. If an employer or insurance company somehow gleaned that a person has an elevated risk for a certain condition. Although there are laws designed to prevent genetic discrimination, real-world compliance isn't always guaranteed. And ironically, it might penalize the very children we aim to protect. On top of data security, we also have the question of consent. The baby can't consent, obviously. Does it really fall to parents, in the haze of postpartum exhaustion, to make a life-altering decision about testing that child's future self? What if the child grows up to resent having their entire genome mapped and stored somewhere, perhaps longing for the ignorance that might have spared them decades of worry. These moral dilemmas do not have easy answers, but ignoring them in the rush to roll out a bold new system is a recipe for complications and public backlash. In some ways, this plan to screen every newborn in England is a fitting microcosm of the 21st century's struggle to balance innovation with caution. We want to harness the wonders of advanced science, but we also want to protect individuals, especially the youngest ones, from an avalanche of unnecessary medicalization. The narrative is still unfolding, and the public response could guide the final shape of these policies. Will strict guidelines be put in place, or will government messaging continue to oversimplify genomic data as a magical cure-all? Will we expand training for healthcare providers so that they can confidently explain the difference between risk and certainty? Perhaps the most gripping part of this entire saga is how it reflects our deepest human anxieties. We're enthralled by the promise of glimpsing the future, but we're also frightened by what we might find. A parent's love is fierce. Craving any advantage that might safeguard a child's health is natural. Indeed, for families known to carry a lethal genetic trait, that early test can be a beacon of hope. But for the vast majority of families, who have no pressing reason to suspect a severe genetic disorder, does opening up the entire genome create an endless labyrinth of what-ifs? And does that labyrinth overshadow the simpler joys of infancy? If all of this is sparking your curiosity, or maybe even stoking your apprehension, then follow along for more discussions on scientific developments that alter our very notion of what it means to be human. We talk regularly about the points at which everyday life and breakthrough research collide, so consider subscribing or choosing to stay tuned for future updates. Your presence helps drive the conversation forward. Of course, you might be wondering, is this approach unstoppable? Will the allure of advanced genetics sweep the country, compelling all prospective parents to sign on the dotted line? Or might public disputes swell, leading to a more modest, carefully regulated program? Some experts argue that the pilot trials will speak volumes. If the real-world data shows overdiagnosis and rampant false positives, public trust might erode faster than you can say genetic predisposition. On the other hand, if success stories multiply, infants rescued from grave diseases they never even realized they had, a wave of popular support may silence critics. While we can't definitively say how this will all play out, we do know that behind every policy are families living through the emotional turmoil of possible diagnoses. The cost and worry, repeated hospital visits, or drastically altered life plans can be immense. Will the potential benefits outweigh these costs on a massive scale? That's the multi-billion-dollar question. And it's not just about money, it's about moral responsibility. Is it morally right to detect everything if half of it turns out to be false or unlikely to develop? Returning to the concept of turning healthy babies into patients in waiting, it's a phrase that reflects a dark side of the medical world. We want to catch problems early, yes, but we don't want to label a generation of newborns as ill from day one. Each baby is a tapestry of possibility. Some threads might never even be woven into reality. The moment you highlight one of those threads, you might inadvertently tangle the entire pattern of that child's life. It's a formidable responsibility for parents and healthcare providers alike. A rational step forward might involve focusing on conditions we can truly treat or manage effectively. Screening for certain severe diseases that have proven interventions could be welcome. Meanwhile, skipping or deferring the screening of conditions that are too uncertain or too far removed in the future could spare families unnecessary angst. But that approach calls for nuance and a willingness to accept that medicine cannot guarantee absolute clarity. Still, the modern mindset often equates technology with progress, and there's a temptation to push forward simply because we can. This temptation is part of why critics warn we must keep our eyes open. The pursuit of a perfect healthcare system, one that detects everything early, is itself imperfect if it lacks protective guardrails for mental well-being, data security, and the dignity of individuals. Then there's the question of how this invention influences society's broader view of health. If future generations grow up with the knowledge of their genetic risk, we might see the entire notion of normal living shift. Will people factor in their genetic risk when choosing careers, spouses, or whether to have children themselves? Might insurance premiums fluctuate wildly based on these risk profiles, despite official attempts to curtail such discrimination? The conversation sweeps beyond just the newborn's immediate future. If a child's genome indicates a strong predisposition to a certain disease, Does it imply other family members might carry the same risk? Suddenly, extended relatives, some of whom might have chosen to remain in the dark, could be inadvertently pulled into the knowledge loop. It's a creeping effect. One test can illuminate entire family trees with genetic revelations, wanted or unwelcome. As we approach the conclusion, let's reflect on the century-long march of medical science. We have eradicated or tamed diseases that once decimated populations. We've harnessed technology to push the boundaries of health and longevity. Now, facing the possibility of universal newborn genome screening, we stand at another threshold. The plan is bold, stirring the old debate between hope and caution. If executed with measured restraint, clear communication, and robust support systems, the potential for earlier, more targeted care is real. But if rushed forward in a haze of optimism and oversimplification, we risk leaving families entangled in a web of confusion and dread. No matter where you stand, skeptical, enthralled, or perhaps both, it's wise to question, to challenge, and to ensure that the guardians and architects of this initiative keep all voices in mind. From the anxious parent who wonders how to interpret a risk score, to the data security expert who fears leaks, to the genetic counselor who desperately needs more colleagues, everyone's perspective matters. This is not a mere footnote in the annals of science. It's a human drama featuring real babies who will grow into real adults grappling with these extraordinary pieces of knowledge. For now, the conversation is open-ended, the final chapter unwritten. Governments may give us pilot programs, results, and refined policies, but it is the families who will feel the day-to-day impact. The question remains, will we champion a balanced middle ground, harnessing genomic breakthroughs without swamping our children with endless health anxiety? Or will we sprint ahead, dazzled by the glow of cutting-edge science, only to discover we've stepped across lines we can't easily redraw? Whether you find yourself leaning toward cautious excitement or firm skepticism, this debate cuts to the core of how we value autonomy, precaution, and scientific promise. Perhaps the essence of it is this: a child's early years are precious, ephemeral. Under the new plan, those years might be shaped by the swirl of genetic data from the moment a heel first touches hospital ground. Are we prepared for that? Or will we look back in a decade, softly wishing we had tested less, while celebrating the truly vital conditions detected in time? Thank you for sharing this moment with us. If you found yourself enthralled or challenged by what we've explored here, and you believe these discussions matter, go ahead and share your thoughts or show your support. It helps us gauge whether these deep dives into the crux of modern medical change resonate with you. Stay engaged, stay curious, and remember, new frontiers are never just about breakthroughs. They're also about how we handle the human lives standing in the middle of it all.